Hello and welcome to the Best F in Fantasy Show, everybody. Hope you enjoyed your Thanksgiving break. I'm your host, Steve Albertini, coming at you live from the basement with my producer, Nick Specca, and senior fantasy analyst, Jerry Procopio. It's week 14. For most of you, that means it is the first round of the playoffs. If you made it, congratulations. If not, listen closely. Better luck next year. Any questions about your lineups, please don't hesitate to hit us up on Twitter at BestFNShow. We know it's a big week, playoff time. You can't make any wrong moves over these next couple weeks with the money on the line. We're just going to jump right into it here. Full slate of games in week 14. Starting on Thursday with the Houston Texans at 2-10.
Ugh.
Every week the record gets worse and worse.
Unbelievable.
It's just harder to see.
High hopes for them.
Against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who a month ago everyone thought was the worst team ever assembled. 3-9. Better record than the Texans. Go figure.
I would have thought.
But the question in this matchup here, which running back is going to put together a better game? More total points. Ben Tate, who last week had a fantastic day, 102 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground. Or Maurice Jones-Drew had 77 yards last week, but has been playing well the last month. What do you think, Jared? Tate or Mojo in this battle for the AFC South cellar?
I'm going to go Ben Tate.
Are we not concerned about his injuries? Because even last week he was still banged up a little bit. You saw him on the sideline, but it obviously didn't hinder his production at all. So we're good with Ben Tate.
I like Ben Tate. I like the way they were established their ground game last week. The Jaguars are very vulnerable against the run. The Jaguars giving up the 9th most points to opposing running backs. I think they're going to lean on them in this game. I think a lot of points are going to be scored. Andre Johnson goes off. Ben Tate's going to get it done.
Ben Tate, really interesting name next year. Because we know he's
going to be a free agent.
He will be a free agent.
He's got to make these last 4 or 5 games count if he wants a contract.
Which, he'll get a contract.
Yeah, he'll get a contract.
Say he goes somewhere like Cleveland or
They need a running back.
What other situation badly needs a running back?
Colts.
I'm
kidding.
They do, but they're not going to invest anymore.
Yeah, I don't
Say he goes to a team like Cleveland. Where do you rank Tate going into next year when he's the full workhorse running back, RB1?
He's still got the injury bug a little bit, but if he does go to Cleveland, which I actually do think he's going to go there, I like him in that offense. With Hoyer coming back, Hoyer's going to regain the starting job. All these weapons on the outside. I like him as maybe a top 10 running back next year, given he plays 14 to 16 games.
It's funny. You add Tate to that offense.
Yep.
And you get look, Brian Hoyer only played a small sample size this year, but he was solid.
He was very good
in his play. You get somebody that can just move the ball with those guys, and they turn into a really fun fantasy offense next year. In the 1 o'clock games on Sunday, Detroit at 7-5 travels to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles at 7-5. Eagles winners of 4 straight. Detroit demolished Green Bay on Thanksgiving. Matt Stafford's first victory against the Packers in his career, albeit without Aaron Rodgers on the other side. Yeah. Who has more total yards in this game in the battle of all-purpose running backs? Reggie Bush, who had 117 yards on the ground and a touchdown last week with 65 additional receiving yards, or LaShawn McCoy, who had 115 total yards last week?
I think it's going to be McCoy, just for the simple fact that if Reggie Bush, even though he's going to get the touches, Bell's presence is still going to affect Reggie a little bit. So, having said that, I think McCoy is going to be the better play here. I mean, they're both going to have great games, but I think McCoy has an edge here.
I have to go Bush with this one. The Eagles, that will rely on Foles a lot. I feel like the Lions like to use Bush more than they like to use Foles. Yeah. So I think Bush is going to have more total yards.
Yeah.
Especially in the reception game this week.
Over the past 5 games, Detroit has yielded just 1.81 yards per carry to running backs.
Yeah.
Really impressive.
Yeah.
Going to be tough sledding for McCoy, but he will get it done in the passing game as well, as will Bush. A lot of points scored in this one. More touchdowns. Matt Stafford or Nick Foles this week?
I'm going to go Matt Stafford, simply because the Eagles are really bad against the pass. I mean, the Detroit isn't so great against the pass, too, but Stafford's got more weapons. And he's got Megatron, so
He's got Megatron.
that's all that matters.
He does have Megatron. I love Stafford, but I feel like he makes too many mistakes.
You know what? A lot of his mistakes aren't really his fault.
Well,
If you look at it, I mean, he has thrown a lot of picks, but if you look at it, a couple of his interceptions over the last 3 weeks, a lot of them were bounced off receivers or they were just flukes. To be honest.
I still think Foles is going to have the better game this week.
I think Stafford gets 3, Foles gets 2, my personal opinion. Indianapolis at 8-4 travels to Cincinnati, who is also 8-4. Fresh off their after the bye victory against the San Diego Chargers last week. Who's the better play between the two struggling quarterbacks? Andrew Luck, who still 8th in fantasy points among quarterbacks, but he only has 2 touchdowns and 4 interceptions in the last 4 weeks. Or Andy Dalton, who ranks 11th among fantasy quarterbacks scoring, but only has 6 touchdowns and 9 interceptions in the last 4 games.
I'm going to go Andy Dalton. They got a home field advantage. And ever since Reggie Wayne got hurt, Andrew Luck just hasn't been the same. There hasn't been, like T.Y. Hilton stepped up a little bit, but he hasn't really had one receiver as the go-to guy every week. Ever since Reggie Wayne got hurt, Luck's production really slipped a lot. So I'm going to go Andy Dalton.
I'm going to go Andy Dalton as well from a fantasy perspective. I don't know, I just have a feeling the Colts, for some reason, they find a way to win these kind of games when you don't think they're going to, it was Denver, San Francisco, Seattle. I have a weird feeling about some luck magic this weekend, but I'm going to roll with Dalton for the safe fantasy play. Atlanta at 3-9 travels to Lambeau to take on the Packers. If there's one person, and believe me, there's more than one, but if there's one person who's been particularly hurt by the absence of Aaron Rodgers, it's been Eddie Lacy. Week 10, 24 attempts, 73 yards. Week 11, 14 attempts, 27 yards. Week 12, had a nice game, 25 attempts, 110 yards. Week 13, against that rush defense of Detroit, 10 attempts for 16 yards. Bounce back game for Eddie Lacy this week against the Falcons, who just gave up 150 yards to the ghost of C.J. Spiller.
I like Eddie Lacy this week. They have to focus on establishing the running game. I mean, Atlanta's probably going to come out, put some points on the board, which is going to put Green Bay in a passing situation, but Atlanta gave up 149 yards and a touchdown to C.J. Spiller last week. They got to use Eddie Lacy this week. I think Eddie Lacy is good for at least 90 yards and a touchdown.
I think with Rodgers out, it's hard to start any Packers player and have that strong confidence they're going to do something.
It is, but Atlanta's defense, nothing special.
Yeah.
Steven Jackson, 84 yards, 2 touchdowns last week against the Bills.
Touchdown week before that, too.
Are you starting him this week, assuming you don't have better options? Because, he's a guy that may have left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths earlier in the season, but now it's playoff time. He's still sitting on your roster.
Yeah,
Are you going to start him in this matchup at Green Bay?
If you held on to him, you don't have better options or more reliable options, I would start Steven Jackson this week. There's going to be a lot of points scored in this game. I think Steven Jackson is good for at least 60 to 80 yards and a touchdown, a few catches.
Is Roddy White back? Was last week his coming out party?
I think he's back.
Cleveland at 4-8 travels to New England to take on the Patriots. Josh Gordon, the big story here. He's been the big story seemingly every week. He's got 498 receiving yards in the last 2 weeks. The only player in NFL history to record over 200 receiving yards in back-to-back weeks. But Bill Belichick has a way of taking the opposing team's best player out of the game plan. Will Josh Gordon over-under 100 receiving yards this week in Foxborough?
You know what? I'm a believer in Aqib Talib, so I'm going to say under.
I think it's going to go over. Especially garbage time if this game's out of hand.
There's going to be garbage time.
They're going to find ways.
New England just
I agree.
So good at home. They know how to manage the clock. They know how to take their best player away. I think it's going to be a bad week for Josh Gordon.
I'm on the Josh Gordon bandwagon right now. I'm sorry.
I'm hoping he does good. He's on a few of my teams, but I don't see him having a big game.
Are you starting Jordan Cameron this week? He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 7.
I would start him this week. They got to throw to somebody. He's one of their main. He's their other main weapon besides Gordon, so you got to start him.
Who's the highest scoring Patriots running back this week? Last week, LeGarrette Blount, 44 yards on the ground and a touch. Shane Vereen, 38 yards on the ground, 5 catches, 37 yards, and a touchdown through the air. Who gets it done this week?
Well, in a PPR format, it's obviously Vereen. And in regular, I would still go Vereen. Just like I said last week, he's going to get yards on the ground, through the air, and he'll get a touchdown, I think.
Stephen Ridley, what happened to you?
I don't know.
Scratch last
Healthy
week.
Scratch.
I don't know.
Hold on to that ball.
4-8 Oakland Raiders travel to the Meadowlands to take on Geno and the New York Jets. Rashad Jennings been hot since week 9. 448 yards and 4 touchdowns since fully taking over for Darren McFadden.
Mm-hmm.
However, is this a week where you bench Rashad Jennings against that stout rush defense of the Jets?
You're only going to bench him if you have better options. Jets give up the fewest points to running backs this year. Jennings, hard guy to bench, but like I said, if you have better options, bench him.
What's a better option? A mid-level guy?
Okay.
Like Fred Jackson?
I like Donald Brown
Donald Brown's good.
over Rashad Jennings this week. I'm trying to think. Somebody else.
Steven Jackson?
Steven Jackson definitely over Jennings. I like Rashad Mendenhall over Jennings. Fred Jackson. Lamar Miller.
Wow.
I know. But
Interesting.
it's tough to bench Jennings, but if you
if
have
there's
other
a
guys
week.
like that, why not?
6-6 Miami travels to 5-7 Pittsburgh. Mike Wallace finally been playing well the last couple weeks. 5 for 127 and a touch against Carolina in Week 12, and 7 for 82 and a touchdown in Week 13 against the Jets. Does he go over or under 100 yards, and does he get in the end zone against his former team this week?
Yes, especially this week against his former team.
Yeah,
That's 100%.
I love when players play against their old team, especially stronger grudge than Mike Wallace does against the Steelers. They gave Antonio Brown that big contract and just left him. So I think he just wants to rub it in their face this week.
Steelers defense isn't anything special.
Yeah,
They're all
Steelers
old
defense,
anyway.
they're all beatable.
4-8 Buffalo travels to Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers. Who's the better play in this matchup if you own both of these guys? C.J. Spiller, who had 149 yards and a touchdown on 15 carries last week, or Fred Jackson, who had 42 yards and a touchdown on 11 carries last week.
I would say Spiller, just because he's...
Spiller's the home run
Yeah,
hitter, but
he is the
I don't
home run
understand why.
They don't give him the ball enough.
Yes, and he never sees the ball in the red zone.
No,
Yeah,
Fred Jackson.
I don't
always
get it.
cleans
It's
up.
all Fred Jackson. But, C.J. Spiller is pure home run hitter. 77-yard rush last week, a 36-yard rushing touchdown last week. Looked pretty good. Bounce back week for Vincent Jackson. He's only had 1 touchdown in the last 6 games. Is this a week against Buffalo where he kind of breaks out a little bit?
I would say so. The Bills gave up the second most points to opposing wideouts this year. Last week, Roddy White had 10 catches, 143 yards against them. I think Vincent Jackson goes over 100 yards and a touchdown or 2.
9-3 Kansas City on a 3-game losing streak.
Ugh, Andy.
Yep.
Travels to the nation's capital to take on RG3 and the 3-9 Washington Redskins. Kind of an odd question here. Who has more yards on the ground? Jamal Charles or Alfred Morris and RG3 combined?
Oh.
That's interesting.
This is a great matchup for
Yeah.
Charles.
I still gotta go Jamal Charles.
Yeah,
I'll go Charles too.
I'll go Charles, too.
The Chiefs make it a point to give Charles the ball, either catching or running. Like,
Yeah.
they'll keep handling the ball.
They don't abandon the running game.
Last
Which
week
is-
they were down with the Broncos, and they still kept running it,
Yeah.
and they almost won.
I can see Charles getting 150 total yards and 2 touchdowns in this game.
I will say this though, Alfred Morris is a solid running back. I know this
He's
year,
really solid.
I know this year wasn't his best year. He's gonna break 1,000 yards. He has 6 touchdowns already, but you just gotta start off Morris. He's still a stud in my opinion.
Yeah.
Alfred Morris really solid. I had him earlier in the year. I traded him. I eventually parlayed him into Shady McCoy, obviously, but I like Alfred Morris. He was such a big part of what made them successful last year.
Yeah.
I think the same can be said for Garcon too, especially in PPR. I know he has I think 3 touchdowns this year, but he has about 84 catches, 980 yards. So for PPR standpoint, Garcon's been pretty solid too.
Mm-hmm.
Other than RG3, that Washington's pretty solid.
Absolutely. RG3 up and down all year.
He's not 100%.
It's not 100%.
They
Still
really
thrown for over 3,000 yards.
Yeah,
And they
sure.
had tight end action too. That was pretty solid.
Yeah.
Jordan Reed.
Jordan Reed.
Yeah.
Been banged up a little bit, but he was solid for a couple weeks in the middle of the season.
Yeah, I really think they should just give RG3 the rest of the year off. But I mean, okay, for fantasy perspective, some people on fantasy they don't want that, but you know what I mean.
No one wants to hear that.
C-Rock.
3-8-1 Minnesota Vikings travel to 6-6 Baltimore. Adrian Peterson crushed it last week against Chicago, like we said he would, over 200 yards on the ground. But in this particular matchup, who has more rushing yards, Adrian Peterson or Ray Rice, facing that leaky Minnesota run defense that gave up 120 yards to Matt Forte last week?
Well, Adrian Peterson's matchup proof. He's going to get it done either way, but I got to give the edge to Ray Rice. Minnesota gives up the second most points to running backs this year. Ray Rice has a great game.
Adrian Peterson is matchup proof.
Yes.
I love that.
It's a great hashtag.
Great hashtag.
Okay.
That's
Matchup
great.
proof.
He got 1,200 yards this year. I mean,
Yeah.
Torrey Smith, 6 catches, 93 yards, and a touchdown on Thanksgiving
what up,
night.
Spats?
Do you have over under 100 yards for Torrey Smith in this matchup against the Vikings?
Over 100 yards. Minnesota defense, nothing special. Hang on, let me see something.
The thing is with Torrey Smith is,
He either breaks one.
for fantasy perspective,
gotta
I had him
break a
last year.
big-
Well, he has scored in the
Yeah.
red zone a couple times.
He's
like
got
the
4
week.
touchdowns this year. It's just he's a headache to have if he's on your team, especially if he's like a number 2 wideout. It's just a hit or miss every week. Either he gets the big play or he doesn't. That's too much to end. Like I personally don't like Torrey Smith fantasy wise.
Yeah, it says something about his quarterback also.
Flacco, the $1 million man.
Yeah.
I mean, Flacco is as great as he was in the playoffs last
Yes.
year. So
He got hot at the right time.
wildly inconsistent in the regular season
Hell of a mustache.
and missing Pitta and
Pitta-patta.
losing Bolden. 5-7 Tennessee travels to 10-2 Denver, who got back on the winning path last week. Peyton Manning reeled off another 5 touchdowns.
MVP.
Who's the better play this week on the ground, Chris Johnson or Noshawn Marino?
I'm going to say Monty Ball has more points than Chris Johnson does this week.
Wow.
So
What about Noshawn? You got to
I
start
know.
This week, right?
That just goes to say, yeah, no Sean, always a must start. Did you see his tears last week?
I did.
That was
very
just- they
They were
patriotic.
like,
It was
Solid.
like,
yeah, they were huge.
They were
yeah,
huge.
I was
Like
like,
exploded
what the hell's
on those
going on?
cheeks.
NFL players are so intimidating. They have
Yeah.
bigger arms and bigger tears than you. Just can't.
Juiced up tears. And then he did I like the army crawl he did.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was great.
That was sick.
That was great.
I wasn't a fan of Marino, and no Sean, and after that, I kind of I leaned a little towards him a little bit. Let's discuss Eric Decker this week. Does he do this performance again, or is this was just like a one-time thing? It's
Well,
He's not going to get
you
4
can't
touchdowns.
bench. If you look at this, I was looking at the stats the other day, and it's either Wes Walker had a few bad weeks in a row, Decker had a few bad weeks in a row. Even Demaryius Thomas had 1 or 2 games where he really didn't do much.
Right.
But you can't bench any one of these guys.
No.
They're going to go off at any given
I
time.
think it's funny that Payne. Someone asked him a question before the game. And they said, what happened to Eric Decker? And he said we have to get him involved more in the game. And then that happened. So
Yeah. I mean, he was just burning rookie cornerback. Can't think of his name.
Cooper.
Yeah, Cooper. So
When you got a quarterback that has 40 touchdowns in 12 games,
yeah,
can't sit anyone on that off. When Julius
No.
Thomas comes back, he's a must start. Which brings me to another question: is Julius Thomas going to play this week?
the latest update I heard is that he wants to play this week. I think last week he tried to pull him.
I just want to say, 3 years ago we mentioned Julius Thomas before anybody else. But
3 years
okay,
ago.
we did. So I'll just cut
Well,
that
stay
out.
tuned for your weekly Julius Thomas update. St. Louis travels to Arizona. Really don't want to talk about this game, but we got one question anyway.
Yeah, go ahead.
Who's the better play in a wide receiver 3 flex option? Tavon Austin or Michael Floyd?
Michael Floyd. You got to go Michael Floyd. He's been on fire lately.
He's been hot.
Palmer's been going to him. After that bye, Palmer, Fitz, Floyd, they're all clicking.
Clicking.
So I don't like Zach Stacy in this game, though.
In a battle of 5-7s, the New York Giants travel to San Diego to take on the Chargers. At the wide receiver spot, who's the better play? Victor Cruz, he's only gone over 100 yards once since week 5. Or Keenan Allen, who had 106 yards last week.
I'm going to go Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen's been just so consistent.
So consistent.
There's no other receiver on the Chargers that's really standing out. I mean, the next guy that's standing out is Ladarius Green, who we gave you. Keenan Allen, you got to ride the hot hand.
Would you start Ladarius Green this week?
I actually would start him. In a deeper league, if I don't have a solid tight end, I would start him this week. They're running a lot of double tight end sets. He played on over 90% of snaps last week. They're making him more involved in this offense every week. And he is going to be an elite tight end in the future. So, Dynasty League, second week in a row I'm saying it.
11-1, Seattle travels to their division rival, the San Francisco 49ers. Who has the better game this week on the ground? Marshawn Lynch, who traditionally kills the 49ers, and that stout rush defense, or Frank Gore at home?
All right, it's Marshawn Lynch. Frank Gore, 16 yards in week 2 against Seattle. It's Lynch.
It's Lynch.
Yeah, it's Lynch.
The closer. Seattle looks solid on Monday Night Football, shutting down Drew Brees and the Saints. 9-3. I'm sorry, Joe.
No, that's all right. Nobody can beat them at home. What are they? They're 14-0 at home the last 2 years.
The road to the Super Bowl will go through CenturyLink Field.
Yep.
9-3. Carolina, fresh off another victory, travels to the Superdome to take on those New Orleans Saints. More total touchdowns in this game. Cam Newton or Drew Brees?
Cam Newton.
I'm going Cam Newton too.
These Panthers are hot.
Yeah, Panthers are really good this year.
The Panthers have a solid defense, not as good as Seattle, and look what Seattle did to them. So
yeah, it's true.
Well, what are they scoring wise? They're first in the NFL, 13.1 points per game. Seattle's second, 15.5.
Wow,
that's impressive.
That's
Shout
really
out
good.
Sean McDermott,
Yeah.
my man.
our boy.
7-5 Dallas travels to 6-6 Chicago. And look, there's a lot of great players in this game. A lot of guys are going to put up nice numbers. You know, not the two most stout defenses in the NFL per se. Romo, McCown, Forte, Murray, Dez, Marshall, a lot of guys. But the guy we're going to talk about here, a darling of the Best F in Fantasy Show, front of the program, Alshon Jeffrey. 12 catches, 249 yards, 2 touchdowns last week in the Metrodome. Second time this year he's going over 200. Jared, Alshon's a friend of yours.
Yeah, he's a
You
good
spoke
friend,
to
man.
him earlier in the week.
I did.
He told you he was going to have a big game
Yep.
against the Vikings. Where do you rank, we asked this question with Josh Gordon last week, where do you rank Alshon Jeffrey next season?
Next season, I would put him between maybe 10 and 15 off the board, because he's become a more like, I'm not going to compare him to Julio Jones, but I would say like he's Brandon Marshall's version of Julio Jones. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
So that's the way I look at it. Brandon Marshall, he's still productive, but like he's approaching, he's over 30 now. Jeffrey is.
Clock is ticking.
Yeah.
For Brandon Marshall. you're
Well,
saying?
no, well, you know, that's young for a that's still young for a
Right.
receiver.
Yeah. He's still got a handful
But
of
I
years
think-
left in him.
I think Jeffrey, he's going to be a wide receiver 1 next year, borderline wide receiver 1.
I think Jeffrey's somewhere nestled between 9 and 12, 9
Yeah.
and 11,
Mm-hmm.
8 and 11. What's not to love about Jeffrey?
He's incredible.
He's strong, he's tall, he's fast.
Yeah.
He's got another great
offense.
receiver on the other side,
Yeah.
so they can't roll coverage to his side.
Yeah.
It's just
really like
it's
Jeffrey.
hard because every other week with them, it's been inconsistent.
Yeah.
It was the same thing with Roddy White and Julio Jones last
Yeah.
year. It was the same thing.
Every week one
yeah,
was better than the other.
yeah, they would focus on shutting one guy down, and then Jeffrey's in single coverage, and he's just going to burn you.
All right, that's all we got for the matchups this week. We'll be right back for our legends and jerk-offs. And everyone's favorite, who the is that sleeper of the week, for Week 14 when we come back. Welcome back, everyone, to Week 14, the playoff push edition of the Best F in Fantasy Show. I'm your host, Steve Albertini, live from the basement. It's time for the legends and the jerk-offs for Week 14. J Pro, rattle them off.
All right. My first one, Ray Rice, hasn't had any huge games this year, maybe one. think one. Yeah, just one. Minnesota gives up the second most points to running backs this year. They allowed over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground the last 3 weeks. Rice should have a solid outing. My next one, Martellus Bennett. He's been quiet, playing his old team. I like players that play their old team. Dallas gives up the 4th most points to tight ends. I think defenses are going to focus on stopping Marshall and Jeffrey on the outside. The middle's going to be open. Bennett's going to get it done. My next one, who the F guy the last 3 weeks? Ladarius Green. Now he's a legend, just like that. Back-to-back weeks, over 90% of the snaps, becoming more and more involved. Chargers go double tight end sets now. High-scoring game. I think he's going to stay hot. My next one, Riley Cooper. Hasn't done much the last 2 weeks, but this game's going to be a shootout. I think he's going to get in the end zone a few times.
A few times?
A few times.
Coop!
All right.
Jerkoffs, week 14. Jared, hit us with it.
All right. My first one, Anquan Bolden. He's been on fire the last couple weeks, but I think he gets shut down. Seattle giving up the second least points to opposing receivers. Sorry, Carm. My next one, Russell Wilson. Other side of the ball. A lot of rivalry here. San Francisco has a lot to prove in this game. They give up the fifth fewest points to quarterbacks. I think Wilson has an off week. Next one, Pierre Thomas. Carolina has a really stout run defense. Didn't do much last week. Not going to do it this week. And my last one, Zach Stacy. Arizona giving up the second least production of running backs this season. It's going to be a second bad week in a row for Stacy.
It's time for everyone's favorite segment, the Who the F is That Sleeper of the Week. And this week, we are sponsored by our good friends at 1800 Tequila, the only tequila for the holidays. Right, Ray?
So smooth.
Good friend Ray Liotta.
He's
Front of the program. How about that time? Remember we saw him out in Vegas, Jared?
Yeah, we did.
And I think it was just me, you, him. What was his name? The guy from Rounders. What's his name?
Martin Landau?
Martin Landau, the legend himself.
That's right, yeah,
that was
there.
a crazy night.
You know, I forgot. I didn't recognize him, but that was him.
That was him.
That was him.
That's something you might be interested in.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was a good
Classic
night.
Marty Landau.
Where were we at? We were at the piano bar at the Wynn, right?
Yeah, Marty. Oh my God, pounding back those scotches.
Yeah.
Crazy Marty. I love you, kid.
I had like 3 Vespers that night. I barely remember that night, but it was. I'm sure it was a fun night.
The best F and sent you guys to Vegas to hang out with them.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Why didn't you come, Nick? What were you doing?
I was making deals for PlayStation 4, so you guys are welcome. Because Call of Duty on PlayStation 4 is incredible.
I think that was the weekend that you were at Pebble Beach with Phil Mickelson. I'm pretty sure that's
It's funny because Phil still won't admit that I told him I used the 9-iron properly. He just won't get that credit. The lefty.
Stubborn.
He's very stubborn.
He's stubborn, Phil.
Tiger, much respect.
Oh.
Thank you, Phil.
Alright.
Jared, give the people what they want.
Alright. My first one. Andre Holmes, Raiders wide receiver, had 7 for 136 yards last week against Dallas. Denarius Moore's a little banged up. This guy's a freak. 6'4", 240 pounds. I think he's 240, 230, whatever.
What up, Holmes?
Great size, great physicality. I think his playing time increases going forward. My next one, AJ Jenkins, stepped in last week after Avery had a few drops. I think he's going to get more chances in this offense. Casey has a plus matchup against Washington's horrible pass defense. Think he's going to make a play. Think he'll get in the end zone. My next one, Ricardo Lockett, 4th string receiver for the Seahawks. Percy's still out. Think he makes a big play in this game. Played a few snaps last week. Think he gets a touchdown this week. My last one, Gavin Escobar, shootout in Chicago. Think he'll vulture a touchdown from Jason Witten. And that's all I got.
Escobar.
Fantastic, Jared. I'm sorry, I just can't stop thinking about Marty that night.
Phil
Oh, yeah.
Crazy. Crazy dude.
Yeah.
Oh, man. All right, so it's week 14. It's the playoffs. Your roster should be set. You shouldn't have to do much tinkering. Shouldn't have to do a lot of pickups.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a lot of start-sit questions out there right now. No one wants to make that one mistake, like leaving Eric Decker on the bench when he gets 4 touchdowns, or leaving Jeffrey on the bench when he gets 250 yards and 2 scores. Nick, the Twitter board is flooded right now with fantasy footballers
Oh.
that need some help. Let's give them some help.
Well, the first one, it's not really a question. I just want to bring it to our attention. It's from @DaveL, and he says, as we head into the playoffs, just wanted to say thanks. Being great to able to bounce things off you guys. #best effing show. And that's how you win in fantasy football. You ask us questions, we give you results.
We appreciate that support very much.
We do. Our first question comes from @Mike_H from Philadelphia. He wants to know, should he start Jordan Cameron, Heath Miller, or Jerry's boy, Ladarius Green at tight end this week?
Ladarius Green, 100%.
course.
I think he has the most upside out of that group.
That's a little tough, but here we go. Our next question comes from @William56. He says, please bench one, Andre Brown, Brandon Marshall, or Dez, ?
Jesus, why?
Tough. No yardage until 75 yards, and it's 2 catches per point, 5 carries per point, and a touchdown 6.
That's a tough one, but
But you need
scoring.
you need to get out of that league. Sorry.
that's tough. But I would bench Andre Brown.
I would too.
You can't bench Marshall. You can't bench that.
So if he gets 20 carries a game, that's only like it's 4 points.
4 points.
Yeah. That's
75
weird.
yards.
20
They
carries a lot.
2
He's
catches for point 2.
Yeah, he's not getting 20 carries. San Diego's actually pretty
I
stout.
don't think Andre
against
Brown
the
broke
run.
50 yards. I know he scored last week, but I
Yeah.
don't think he broke 50 yards last week.
Yeah, I think he only had like
He
15 carries.
He scored twice last week.
Yeah.
But San Diego's pretty stout against the run, but it should be a lot of passing.
Marshall and Dez. Plus, you want the Monday Night Miracle.
Mm-hmm.
You need that in play, right, Nick? You're a fan of the Monday Night Miracle.
Yeah, let's hope it works this week too as well. Our next question comes from @Seth Vigdor. He wants to know, playoff start this week. Thanks for the help. Of course. Fred Jackson over Spiller. Or take Jordy Nelson in there in the flex. So either he starts both or takes one out and has Jordy in there.
I like Jordy at home against Atlanta, but the only problem is he doesn't have Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
But
Which it doesn't
Yeah,
look
it's-
good for Rodgers this week, but it's a possibility that he can still play.
yeah, they did say that, but I don't think he's going to play.
If Rodgers somehow gets on the field,
You got to
Jordy's
start
the
Nelson.
play.
Yeah.
So you start Jordy and Spiller and you leave Jackson out?
You said it's PPR?
Yeah, he didn't say. Yeah, I'm sorry, PPR playoffs, yes.
I would take the risk of going Spiller.
I would take Spiller too. Go for the home run.
All right, Seth. So if Rodgers in, you start Jordy and Spiller. If not, you start Spiller and Fred Jackson. Our next question comes from Breeman Sylvia. He said 2 separate teams. I own RG3 and Andrew Luck for the playoffs. Don't feel too good about it. Any waiver wire quarterbacks better play this week?
Wow. Scouring the waiver wire. For
This
a
is where
quarterback.
Jerry comes in.
I like Case Keenum a lot this week. I like Ryan Fitzpatrick a lot in garbage time this week. Denver's not that great against the pass, giving up the 8th most points to quarterbacks this year. I like Ryan Fitzpatrick a lot. He's going to throw the ball 40 times.
All right. Our next question comes from @TheSeaIsle69. He wants to know Fred Jackson or Steven Jackson. Which Jackson is the right start in the PPR flex?
I like Steven Jackson this week. He's been hot the last 2 weeks. I'm going to keep it going. Steven Jackson.
Keep it going.
Yeah.
Our next question comes from @Taken212. He wants to know, do I ride the hot hand with Roddy White or do I start James Jones, pending Rodgers' return?
Roddy White.
Either way.
If Rodgers does come back, well, yeah, go ahead, Roddy White, whatever.
What do you mean, whatever?
All right, if Rodgers isn't going to play.
No.
But if Rodgers does play,
He might play, but probably not.
if Rodgers plays, it's James Jones, but probably not.
Probably not.
Our last question comes from @There's no I in team. He wants to know, Steven Jackson.
That's Steven Jackson question.
No, I'm sorry. Was it Steven? No, I'm sorry. Yeah, Steven Jackson or Lamar Miller this week. You have to figure.
Steven Jackson. Miami's playing Pittsburgh.
That's all the questions we have this week. Good luck to everyone in the playoffs. I'm going to send it back to our party man, Mr.
Our
Vegas.
party man.
Mr. Vegas himself.
Come on.
Steve
Everyone
Albertine.
knows Jerry's Mr. Vegas.
That's true, I
Come on
apologize.
now.
Steve,
They brought you here?
Jared, how many times have you been to Vegas? Just want to get this on record. In a span of 2 years.
6.
6 times, ladies and gentlemen.
2 years? No, 3 years. 6.
He wins fantasy leagues and then takes those earnings and takes into a bigger profit in Vegas.
Unbelievable.
Shout out to J Pro on that one. Carm, hope the dentist is going well.
And that's all for week 14, ladies and gentlemen. Stay tuned for the last 2 episodes of the Best Effing Fantasy Show coming up.
The series finale.
The series finale coming up in 2 weeks. We will not be here on Christmas Eve, so just a little programming note. If you guys were planning on being here Christmas Eve,
okay.
I just said we're not going to do it,
Okay.
so
That's
we all have to be here by ourselves.
I'll tell my grandma I can't make it for the 7 fishes.
So keep it locked for the next 2 weeks of fantasy football advice. Good luck to everyone in the playoffs. Start your studs. Don't overthink it.
Yes, good point, Steve. Always start your subs.
Don't overthink it, guys. Hit us up with any questions during the week. Best Effing Show on Twitter. We're out.